Hey everyone, welcome to the Veloce Race Review. I'm Aaron McNanny.
And I'm Pat Brown. Today we're going to be reviewing the Rivertown Cross, which took place just west of Lancaster.
Right, so this race was right in a little county park on the side of the Susquehanna River, really nice bridge off kind of over the water. You can see I was able to get out front on that opening sprint. Had a really strong start. This right here happens to be the two longest power stretches on the course, so I was able to leverage my position in this part of the race and put out some serious power. You see my heart rate's at 175 beats per minute, so I'm really trying to get as much of a lead as I possibly can.
And one thing you can really see, and especially right from the start, is there's a lot of frost on the ground here.
Yeah.
It was a cold morning, which means throughout the day it's going to get maybe a little bit wetter.
Yeah.
And even right now you can see you're sliding around a little bit. It's a little bit slick for sure.
Yeah, so that thick frost basically just melted into the ground, and it made it, some of the corners were definitely very slick. This was a pretty fast-moving section right here as it's kind of meandering along the side of the river, and we're headed into a switchback section. One of the issues that I really felt today was not knowing what tire pressure to run, because there were definitely those power sections, and even here you could get away with some pretty high tire pressures. But then coming into these more wet sections, more technical hairpin turns. Now this isn't super technical, but you definitely wanted more traction. So I opted for a lower tire pressure, which gave me good traction around these corners. But then on those power stretches, I just felt like I was on a bouncy house. It was very difficult to translate into the ground.
And you can see you're opening up gaps here. I think as we'll go through this VRR rather, that maybe you went out a little bit too hot, but we'll get into that.
Well, I think and what we'll see is I had some pretty major technical difficulty halfway through this race. My philosophy is I want to get out front as much as possible. I don't like to be behind people in a cross race because, my technical skill is what lacks. And so as much as I can distance myself from people, I'm able to put out power and not have to worry about passing people. This section right here got pretty slick at times. And actually, real quick, we're moving into a really interesting section. It doesn't look interesting, from afar, but this is a series of near 270-degree switchbacks around these trees that really made for an interesting course feature. You can see they're super wide, and they, like I said, 270 degrees. Usually when you're doing switchbacks, it's like 180 degrees. So really cool.
Another thing to note is that there's a lot of leaves on the course here, which just adds to how slick and how cautious you need to be going around these turns.
So here's another power stretch. I'm trying to put out as much power as possible. We just bypassed a little bit of the course. That was a little divot, and we're actually coming into the start line. I will say the start finish was a little bit odd in this race. I didn't think, a little bit of a technical error there. I do think that maybe they could have worked a little bit more on the finishing stretch. You can see now's the finishing stretch, and you have about, 50 meters or so to sprint, and that's the finish right there, basically.
It was a little bit odd, I thought, but maybe for the more technical rider, that could be some place that, or a course specifically, that would definitely benefit them.
Yeah. So this is the hill section. This is the majority of the elevation differential on this course. Coming up into a little bit of a slick turn, into a hairpin turn. As long as you hit it right, you're able to maintain your traction. There was one kind of semi-run up. This is a really nice off-camber turn, descending off-camber turn. This section right here, most people ended up running. It was very rideable. I was able to ride it twice, I think. But there was several times where you just had to get off and run it.
Being that there were roots there, it was pretty steep, right?
Yeah.
So the roots definitely add to the technicality, which will make it a little bit more difficult to get up, especially being that the roots are right at the top of the hill. So you've already lost a lot of momentum once you get to that point.
This corner was very difficult for me. And actually, I'll say right now, what what happened was I actually lost my rear brake. I don't know what happened, but the hydraulic line that connects to the rear caliper must have gotten pulled out or something, because that's where that oil's coming out.
Yeah.
So I had complete loss of rear brake, and that corner especially was just terrible because it's a descending right hand, 270-degree turn, and I'm slowing down as much as I can with my left brake, which just causes you to lose traction. It was a nightmare.
Yeah, you don't want to be braking with your front tire when you're going around corners. You can get away usually with the rear tire because then your back will just slide around, and sometimes that can be helpful. But man, even braking straight, if you only have one brake, that can be detrimental to your race, and it's also an issue of safety sometimes too, if you're not careful enough. And
I always say this, I'm not the most technical rider, and so braking and accelerating is one of my moves. That's like one of the tools in my toolkit, is being able to brake heavy and pedal heavy. I'm not saying, I definitely don't recommend that. You should get better at. I need to get better at riding, but to lose that tool altogether was very difficult.
Yeah, because if you brake late into corners and accelerate out early, really hard, that's sometimes difficult for individuals who might be better at kind of just maintaining amount of power, and it's almost like you're doing intervals, and some people aren't used to doing those high intensity intervals. So I would say I'm someone who's a little bit better at those kind of intervals. I find myself really braking hard before corners and again coming out of them pretty fast. But I know some people can just be super buttery smooth, and sometimes it's hard to hold their wheel.
So right now I'm in 5th place. This was a frustrating time to go down. One of two very frustrating times to go down, because I was thinking that I was going to be able to catch this guy, this 5th place positioning. And because I went down there, not only did I open up an opportunity for the guy that was behind me to gain ground on me, but I basically lost my opportunity to catch this guy in front of me. That was just, the course was, sincerely, look at the course now. It's a lot more wet than the first lap. That whole section is mud now. So the course changed, and you got to be able to adapt. And really, this is my first full season of racing, but my second season racing cyclocross. I got to learn to adapt more and recognize that this course is going to change as it's being ridden, and adapt accordingly. And that may have caused my crash partially, was not recognizing the changing course conditions and also fixating on passing the guy in front of me, which caused me to forget to ride the course.
I mean, you can see at that point we're about halfway through the race. Now we're about 3/4.
And this is where I'm about to go down.
Okay.
So this guy is frustrating. So I'm lapping him, and it's hard for me to pass him there. And I'm literally, I did everything I could. I did everything that I could to squeeze that left brake, and I could not scrub speed fast enough. So
yeah, even though you got to put your body behind the saddle, get your weight back as much as you can, and then apply the brake. But there's at some point, really, there's no more that you can do to try to slow down, especially when you only have one brake.
Yeah. So I just got passed by sixth place. So now I'm in 7th place, and this is where I'll stay for the rest of the race. I did put out a pretty serious. You can see I'm sprinting out of the saddle right there. I'm trying to catch this guy back on, but the aerobic cost of that effort. So that's the guy that I lapped right there. So the aerobic effort that I had to make to get back on, I think that just cost me that position.
Yeah, I think these are lead riders that we have up here. We're going into the finish, but because you put down those big watts throughout the race, I think that made it a little bit more. And plus, it's a little bit technical going into the finish. I think that's kind of what let this gap open up a little bit more, just right at the end. Yeah,
a lot of errors, a lot of crashes. And I mean, I guess I should be glad that I was able to finish in 7th place, considering I didn't have a rear brake. But ultimately, when a mechanical like that happens, you just got to ride it out and do what you can to finish the race and mitigate as much position bleeding as possible.
Yeah.
So there's the finishing sprint. And yeah, like I said, I got 7th place. Right now, my own series standings, I'm in 5th place in the series, which who knows? We've got one race left in the series, so maybe I'll be able to move up a position or two, depending on how well I do at the race this weekend. But overall, really nice course, and yeah, hopefully next year they'll work out some of the course kinks.
Mm-hmm. It's always an evolution when it comes
absolutely.
to courses. Yeah.
Well, thanks for following us here at the Veloce Race Review. We're happy to get these done as soon as possible after these races wrap up. So we're a couple days after the race, but we'll be a little bit faster as time goes on. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. I'm Aaron McNanny.
And I'm Pat Brown. Take care.